be in the presence of people who are vibrating at a possibility of gratitude. Is there anybody in this room, you don't have to show your hands, but just become aware of it, who's feeling a little disheartened or out of sorts or sorrowful? That's what happens on that night. And then there's a bunch of people who are passing this microphone saying that for which they're grateful. And it lifts people. So I did notice one person in particular. This microphone was passed, and he spoke. When he spoke, everything in the room altered. In television, as in theater work, they will tell you, they will urge you, never work with animals, never work with kids, and never work live theater where there's dinner being served. Because there is so much noise of the clinking of cutlery on plates and cups and conversation, you really don't have people's attention. But then a man named Sean got the microphone, and the room went absolutely silent. It went so silent, like the silence was a presence. Like this, it wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of possibility, and the room leaned in. It occurs to me that we need to have an encore of that. So please help me welcome to the stage Sean Garcia. Hey, Sean.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back. How was first service for you?
It was great. I had never gone to a 9:30 service before, so this is a different vibe.
What's different about this one?
Joyfulness. It's tangible.
In this room? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was tangible in first service?
Pure attentiveness and deep reflection in the moment.
Cool. So in religious iconography, you can add the crucifix, the Star of David. You might see people with their prayer rugs. And you'll see people with like Kuan Yin on their altars. And as I understand it, you have a moving violation and a pill bottle in yours.
I do.
Can you tell me about your moving violation?
So this leads into what David was alluding to with the soup supper. So I'd only been coming here for maybe a year and a half, and I invited my friend who's here today to join me in the soup supper, which we had never gone to before. And that entire day I was reflecting on what I was thankful for, grateful for. And not just that day or not just that year, but really when I look at the scope of the last 4 years, 4.5 years in particular, what is it that I am most grateful for? And it all came in this one very defining moment. I was driving home from Portland, Oregon about 2 years ago in the process of moving back to San Jose, and I was pulled over by a police officer. And the reason I start with that is that I came out as transgender and started my transition just 2 years prior to that, and I had not changed my name or gender on any of my documents. So out of all the things you could be fearful for in living this journey, that was the thing I feared the most, was being pulled over by a police officer alone in the middle of the night in a rural area. And all of those things came true. But this moment that was so fear-based ended up being a very redemptive experience. So 2 hours south of Portland, Oregon, very rural, 1:30 in the morning, I get pulled over. And I knew in that moment that I was feeling fear and curiosity at the same time. And so the police officer comes to my window and addresses me as sir, and I decide to be honest, but not about my gender or name, because the story gets more complicated. I had Texas license plates, I had Oregon car insurance, and I had a California driver's license. All with a female name and a female gender marker. But I didn't address that with him. But I was honest about all of the rest. And he took my paperwork and went back to his car, and I had just a few moments to really acknowledge what had already started. This was what I was meant to experience at this time in my life, at this hour in this location. And so he comes back to the car and gives me the ticket and gives me all the paperwork back. And he asks me if I have any questions, and I don't have any, so I say no. And then in a split moment, he turns and he's about to walk away. And something dawned on me, and it was a little voice that said, "Say something." And without giving it any thought, I did just that. I said, "Hold on a second. I actually have something to share with you." And he came back and I said, "I know that you know that I am not male. And I started transitioning a few years ago, and my greatest fear was everything that just happened right now. And yet, what I feared the most did not happen. Thank you for treating me with the utmost respect. It has changed my life." And he surprised me. He said, "You're the first transgender person I have ever met. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I wish you well." I had 9 more hours to drive home, time that I would have normally spent listening to music or a podcast, but I honestly spent it in absolute silence. Because that day changed my life, and I am fairly certain it changed his, and he will continue changing other lives like me when they get pulled over. So, with the soup supper, what I was most grateful for was receiving unconditional love by strangers. And I say that because I am a person of privilege. I have the privilege of receiving unconditional love from my family and friends, and I do address that that is not always the case for people like me. But I am grateful that I do have that. And so to extend my gratitude to those who don't owe me anything, the bank teller that I've come across, this police officer, and many others. They don't owe me anything, but they graciously showed me love.
Reverend Susan wants to know, did you pay the ticket?
Yeah, my spirituality is not that strong.
So how is it that, what did you do with the actual ticket?
So I'm a really sentimental person. So I think when we go through our lives documenting milestones, we tend to do so with pictures. And while I do that, there have been times in this journey that have been very unique. And so I've saved that ticket, so I know the gentleman's name. And I've saved other things along the journey that only I know. I was the only one present in that experience. So a picture would mean nothing to anybody else, but this ticket is very symbolic for me. So I still hold on to it.
So is a pill bottle.
So is a pill bottle.
Do you mind if I take you there?
Sure.
Tell us about the pill bottle.
So I came out when I was 15 years old.
What does that mean, by the way, you came out?
I disclosed to my family that I was transgender when I was 15. I was a sophomore going into junior year at Presentation High School, all-girls Catholic school, which I want to add has been the most, and was, is, and will continue to be the most special place in my heart. They treated me with the utmost respect then, and even more so now. When I came out at 15, which was 20 years ago, life for transgender people and mainstream society looked very, very different. There were no resources in YouTube. There were very few therapists who actually knew anything about this. And so sharing this with my family at that time, as I look back on it now after processing the context for which this information was shared, I can show compassion and love towards the response that I received, which was a raw, honest response from my family, which I understand now. But given that response, from age 15 to age 30, I did life. We all have experiences that parallel just our normal life trajectory. So I did life what appeared to be very well. I got jobs, I bought houses, I traveled. But there was this other side of me that carried through, which showed up in my physical well-being. I was extremely ill for 15 years, and none of my tests came back positive. Until January 1st, 2015, I came out to my family again, but I showed up as a different person. And by doing so, it landed drastically different on them. From that point to today, which has been 4 years and 7-ish months, I have been 100% symptom-free. And it just proves to me as a therapist as well that secrets truly kill people. And so I live my life secret-free now. That was my greatest secret that I thought would lead to my greatest demise, and it has brought me the most amazing freedom and health in all aspects of my life. And so that's how life has been for the last 4.5 years, secret-free.
So you kept the pill bottle?
I had 3 pills left, and I hold on to that. It's again a personal milestone for me, and a reminder of what life used to be. And I look back at those days, and I did the best I could do with what I was capable of then. And I'm doing so much better now.
So, Sean, you said that you showed up differently when you came out the second time. Can you tell us a little about that? Because I suspect in this room there are people who are facing things and they don't know how to show up differently. But when you describe it, they will know.
So prior to coming out to my family, I was living in Houston, Texas during this whole transformative time.
Hold the phone.
I know.
Say that again. Houston, Texas.
And Houston is the most amazing place to be a transgender person, from my experience. And it surprises everybody. I'll go on a tangent here, and I'll explain why. When I came out to my therapist there, she recommended this place, kind of like the Billy DeFrank Center, but it's called the Montrose Center in downtown Houston. And they had a transgender support group there every Wednesday. And I didn't think anything of it as being every Wednesday, but I went. And I was shocked that on that first Wednesday night, there were over 50 people sitting in that room, representing every demographic, every religion, every socioeconomic status, every part of the transition. The youngest was 16, the oldest was 70. And week after week, this group grew and grew. And it wasn't until I moved to Portland, Oregon, that I was confused as to why I couldn't find that same type of group. And my doctor there said to me, well, I know why. It's because here in Portland, we just assume everyone is welcome. People don't need to band together because there is a perception that all are welcome. That made sense to me. In Houston, there was no other place. And we were a very, very connected community because of it. And so I'm really grateful for that experience. I went on a tangent.
It was a good tangent. So,
coming out to my parents and showing up differently.
Showing up differently. May I pause this as a setup? Who here is facing something? Show of hands. I mean, come out to the people around you. I'm facing something. Anybody else facing? Who here, keep your hands up, please. Who here knows somebody who's facing something? Who here's breathing? So I'm inviting you to listen, if you will, with the filter that you're about to get the download for which you've been begging. Like you're saying, please show me a sign. Here he is.
In my neighborhood in the Woodlands, there's a church called Woodlands Church. It's a Christian church that's not a mega church, but it's much larger than I had ever experienced. I had never stepped out of a Catholic church before, so the whole presentation of the service was vastly different, and it honestly felt a bit artificial to me in the beginning, until it became something that I looked forward to every week. And the minister was a father, a brother, a grandfather, and he's had such amazing words of wisdom. It's still on? He had such amazing words of wisdom. He said, you have the ability to turn your mess into your message, your fear into your faith, and your pain into your purpose. And in the same day, he mentioned two lines that I had always known about, but it never fully was digested. And he said, "You were created in God's image, and he loves you unconditionally." And as I sat there, I asked myself, why is it that I can't love myself unconditionally? And what would it look like if I came out and if no one else on the earth loved me but God, would I be okay? And without any hesitation, I said yes. I changed in that moment, and I came home a couple months later, and that is when I came out to my family. And it wasn't a conversation where I was asking for acceptance. It wasn't a conversation where I was asking for love. I already had it. And I simply asked them to join the journey. Transgender journey is 99% transformed internally for me. But yet in society, 99% of the journey is what you see. And so I knew that this was going to look different. And I wanted to empower my family as much as I was already empowered. And so I went back to Texas, and they remain here in San Jose, and it gave them the opportunity to have their own experience here, to come out in the way they wanted to, have it look whatever way they wanted it to look, to have their own emotional reaction and honor that themselves. And as I was assuming, because I had already begun coming out to people and catching the love already, it wasn't long before they began to have that same experience. And we're all proud to say that we haven't lost a single friend. And it's not because our friends are all uber liberals. They're not. But I showed up differently. My family showed up differently. And it landed differently in our community. And it empowered them, and it's empowered all of our friends and stretched them. And they've made mistakes, and it's okay. It's been a highly, highly empowering experience.
So what about those that are not so liberal?
One of the last people I came out to is a husband and wife who live in my area. And they are very public figures, and they are known for being extremely conservative. They put a sign in their front yard against gay marriage. And I knew them personally. We go to the pool together. And I hesitated coming out to them, and I intentionally left it to the last outing. And I went over to their home, and I explained to them my spiritual transformation. And then I revealed my experience to them. And the husband said to me, "Sean, you are always welcome in our home." And that has been true from that day forward. They've used my name, Sean. They've used the proper pronouns. We lay next to each other on chase lounges at the pool. And this was a couple who, on social media, is extremely, extremely conservative. But in the privacy of our relationship, and I would assume it would spill out, that they showed me unconditional love, and my experience took them to a place that they had never experienced before.
Well, so while you're speaking, I have this experience of how I'm surrounded by people who are powerfully interested in diversity and inclusivity, provided the diversity is only like they are, and provided they are inclusive only with people with whom they agree. And those are usually the loudest for inclusivity. And yet you tell us that you went through part of your journey of transitioning in the great state of Texas. It actually makes me kind of weepy because we may be wrong. And some of us who have ideas about others may be wrong. And Portland, well, they decided to keep it weird. They're proud of that. And that police officer, banker, your conservative neighbors. I'm really moved by your mom and dad. I can't even look at them right now. Because they're pretty awesome. And they're probably always on good behavior when I'm around. So they're probably not always expressive in such a way. But I know the man who's sitting next to me on the stage is a product of a community. Even if you've invented that community yourself. Like, that's what I'm getting from you.
I think it's always been there. I just wasn't ready to walk into those communities. We have a perception that we're not welcome. And while that may be true, it's sometimes a perception. I'm Catholic. I go to Mass on Sunday nights. I'm a Eucharistic minister, I'm a lector and commentator, and I'm very, very visible. And the pastor of our church knows all about me. There may be a perception that people like me are not welcome. And again, unfortunately, people have personally experienced not being welcome. I showed up differently at St. Christopher's. And they have then thus shown me unconditional love. I've walked into another community called Garcia. It's a Catholic layperson community. They do retreats that are divided by gender. And without any hesitation, I asked my friend of mine, I'd like to do the men's retreat. I grew up in an environment with all women, essentially. Strong women, presentation, amazingly strong female friends, female colleagues. And here I was transitioning into male at 32 years old, and I really didn't know how to do it. It's not something that you suddenly turn a light switch on and begin to feel male from the inside out. And so I asked to go to Curcio, knowing that it was an experience that I knew nothing about. It was quite the unknown of how I would be received. And I waited until the last day when we were sharing. And all along those 4 days, I was treated like everybody else. And on the last day, I shared with them. And man after man stood in line and gave me hugs. These are men that are all ages. Very prominent Catholic folks, more liberal folks. And while they were hugging me, I cannot tell you how many men whispered in my ear, "My grandson is transgender. My granddaughter's transgender. I'm so glad you are here." So there's a perception, and I believe from my experience that my perception is fear-based. And it does require having full trust, full faith to overcome that fear.
Everybody, this is Sean Garcia.